Oh, hey everybody. Give me a moment there. I just gotta send out the old ping. Mm-hmm. Nah, not gonna bother. Wasn't there. Thanks. There we go. Uh, ba- Oh, okay. Going to give it a few minutes here for people to trickle in, and then we'll keep going. I'm hoping. Well, we'll go. So we're going to get over page 100 very shortly here. We're at page 98. So we'll see how far we get in this stream. I'm gonna actually turn my volume down a little bit, a wee bit loud. Oh, my light's charged. Yeah, hope everyone's having a good day. Good start to the week. Oh, boy. It was up in the air whether a stream was happening today. Cannot lie. We had a fairly rough start to the day. Oh, thank God, Dorn. That's immensely useful. It's actually one of the things I've been trying to farm is clay, and it's been very annoying trying to get it. So that is very, very useful. Uh, should have hopefully disabled those properly, so we should be good. Oh, wait, hold on. Is it? No, it's fine. I thought it was limiting FPS when I was tabbed out, but it is not, thankfully. I mean, even if it was, you wouldn't be able to tell. Very nice one, very nice. Oh, okay. We'll give it about 2, 3 more minutes, and then we'll get going. Anyone been up to anything fun today? I know it's a Monday and all, but you know, never know. Some people can have fun on a Monday. My own phone now is on vibrate. Let me plug it in. It is real low on battery. That's probably enough for now, Dorn. Probably. I mean, it's mainly needed for the clay bootles for tannin, so we should be good. Okay, so that's done. That's done. Yeah, it's regular timber. Yeah, 500 wood. That should do us for a while. I know we need like 300 for all the timber. For the well, yeah, well, it's like wood for the timber for the brig. Because the brig takes like what 200 timber or something, like 100 planks. Eh, you over there. Off. Right, and I'd say we are just about good to get going. Give me one moment just to fix my up here. Move you out the way. You there. Yeah, that's what I'm doing with the gym. There. Move the mic over here so it's a bit more straight. Try not to have a voice crack like I'm a teenager. Hey. No problem, Schroeder. Have a good evening, buddy. We'll eventually get you sticking around for one of these again. Okay. Right, and there we go. Okay, so we left off last time. Where did we leave off last time? Ah, yes, we left off last time with the Bundeswehr, who were in the middle of the South African plan, or South Africa plan, to essentially abandon civilians so that all of the military assets could fall back to a fortified position, rebuild their strength, and then gradually push out and reclaim their country. And now we move on to the next area. So, as a reminder, folks, I will not be reading chat whatsoever while I'm doing this. And we will be having little breaks in between the chapters. And apparently ad break. Actually, you know what? What? No, Bundeswehr is just their general armed forces. You're thinking of the GIGN. And even then, I don't think they're part of the military. I think they're part of the police force. Wait, no, Bundeswehr is their... that's their military, isn't it? Dorn. Dorn's stuck in ads. Damn it. I want to wait for the ads to end. Excuse me. Apologies, folks. I was planning on starting, but the ad gods decided to screw me over. In fact, I'm probably going to run to 67. I'm going to run the ad as soon as it lets me. Can I disable ads for the stream? I'm actually tempted to disable ads for the stream. Settings. Can I disable ads for the stream? That would frankly be ideal. Like, ads. What? No, I know fucking ads work. Go away. Frequency. No, I can't. Okay. That's fine. I didn't think so, but I said I'd check anyway. Okay. No, we're not. We're not. So, okay, I'll clarify something for you, Jimmy. The South Africa Plan is merely the name that a fella named Rediker it's a plan that a civilian named Rediker came up with to essentially retake the world from the grips of the infection, from the grips of the zombie plague. Because without this plan, the world would basically be dead. And remember that this book is told as a collection of survivor stories about 10 years after the end of World War Z. That's why I mentioned South African Plan. Hey, Wandering Ronin. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoy this stream then. We're page 98. And the ads should be done, so we are going to get going, everyone. So again, I'm not going to be reading chat. So if anything major comes up, ping me in Discord or something like that. Hopefully one of the mods will be here soon. And with that, let's get going. We'll see y'all shortly. Yevchenko Veterans Sanatorium, Odessa, Ukraine. Pretext. The room is windowless. Dim, fluorescent bulbs illuminate the concrete walls and unwashed.
The patients here mainly suffer from respiratory disorders, many made worse by the lack of any usable medication. There are no doctors here, and understaffed nurses and orderlies can do little to ease the suffering. At least the room is warm and dry, and for this country, the dead of winter, that is a luxury beyond measure. Bodan Taras Kandaratwik sits upright on his cot at the end of the room. As a war hero, he rates a hung sheet for privacy. He coughs into his handkerchief before speaking. End of pretext. Chaos. I don't know how else to describe it. Complete breakdown of organization, of order, of control. We just fought 4 brutal engagements. Luk, Rovno, Novograd, and Zitomir. Goddamn Zitomir. My men were exhausted, understand. What they'd seen, they'd had to do, and all the time pulling back, rearguard actions, running. Every day you heard about another town falling, another road closing, another unit overwhelmed. Kiev was supposed to be safe, behind the lines. It was supposed to be the center of our new safety zone. Well garrisoned, fully resupplied. And so what happens as soon as we arrive? Are my orders to rest and refit, repair my vehicles, reconstitute my numbers, rehabilitate my wounded? No, of course not. Why should things be as they should be? They never have been before. The safety zone was being shifted again, this time to the Crimea. The government had already moved, fled to Sevastopol. Civil order had collapsed. Kiev was fully evacuated. This was the task of the military. Left of it. Our company was ordered to oversee the escape route at Petona Bridge. It was the first all-electricity welded bridge in the world. Many foreigners used to compare its achievement to that of the Eiffel Tower. The city had planned a major restoration project, a dream to renew its former glory. But like everything else in our country, that dream never came true. Even before the crisis, the bridge had been a nightmare for traffic jams. Now it was crammed with evacuees. The bridge was supposed to be closed to road traffic, but where were the barricades we were promised? The concrete and steel that would have made any forced entry impossible. Cars were everywhere. Little lags and old zigs, a few Mercedes, and a mammoth Gaz truck sitting right in the middle, just turned over on its side. Tried to move it, get a chain around the axle and pull it free with one of the tanks. Not a chance. What could we do? We were an armored platoon then. Tanks, not military police. We never saw any MPs. We were assured they would be there, but we never saw or heard from them. Neither did any of the other quote-unquote units along any of the other bridges. To call them units is a joke. These were just mobs of men in uniform, clerks and anyone who happened to be attached to the military suddenly became in charge of traffic control. None of us were set up for this. We weren't even trained for it, weren't equipped. Where was the riot gear they promised us? The shields, the armor. Where was the water cannon? Our orders were to process all evacuees. To understand the quote-unquote process. To see if any of them had been tainted. Where were the goddamn sniffer dogs? How are you supposed to check for infection without dogs? What are you supposed to do? Visually inspect each refugee? Yes, And yet, that is what we were told to do. He shakes his head. Did they really think that those terrified, frantic wretches with death at their back and safety, perceived safety, only meters away were going to form an orderly line and let us strip them naked to examine every centimeter of skin? Did they think men would just stand by while we examined their wives, their mothers, their little daughters? Can you imagine? And we actually tried to do it. Other alternative was there. They had to be separated if any of us were going to survive. What's the point of trying to evacuate people if they're just going to bring the infection with them? He shakes his head, laughing bitterly. It was a disaster. Some just refused. Others tried to run by, or even jump into the river. Fights broke out. Many of my men were beaten badly. 3 were stabbed. 1 was shot by a frightened grandfather with a rusty old Tokarev. I'm sure he was dead. I wasn't there, you understand. I was on the radio trying to call for support. Help is coming, they kept saying. Do not break. Do not despair. Help is coming. Across the Dnieper, Kiev burned. Black pillars rose from the city center. We were downwind. The stench, terrible. The wood and rubber and stink of burning flesh. We didn't know how far they were now. Maybe a kilometer. Less. Up on the hill, the fire had engulfed the monastery. Goddamn tragedy. With its high walls, its strategic location, we could have made a stand. Any first-year cadet could have turned it into an impregnable fortress, stocked the basement, sealed the gates, and mounted snipers in the towers. They could have covered the bridge for fucking ever. I thought I heard something. A sound from the other bank. That sound, you know, when they are all together. They're close. That, even over the shout, the curses, the honking horns, the distant sniper fire. You know that sound. He attempts to mimic their moan, but collapses into uncontrolled coughs. He holds his handkerchief up to his face. It comes away bloody. That sound was what pulled me away from the radio. I looked over the city. Something caught my eye. Something above the rooftops and closing fast. The jet streaked over us at treetop level. There were 4 of them. Sukhoi 25 Rooks. Close and low enough to identify by sight. What the hell, I thought? Are they going to try cover the bridge's approach? Maybe bomb the area behind it? It had worked at Rovno, at least for a few minutes. The Rooks circled us, as if confirming their target, then banked low and came straight at us. Devil's mother, I thought. They're going to bomb the bridge. They'd given up on the evacuation and were going to kill everyone. Off the bridge, I started shouting. Everyone get off! Panic shot through the crowd. You could see it like a wave, like a current of electricity. People started screaming, trying to push forward, back, into one another. Dozens were jumping into the water with heavy clothes and shoes that prevented them from swimming. I was pulling people across, telling them to run. I saw the bombs released, thought maybe I could dive at the last moment, shield myself from the blast. Then the parachutes opened, and I knew. In a split second, I was up and dashing like a frightened rabbit. "Button up!" I screamed. "Button up!" I leapt onto the nearest tank, slammed the hatch down, and ordered the crew to check the seals. The tank was an obsolete T-72. We couldn't know if the overpressure system still worked. Hadn't tested it in years. All we could do was hope and pray while cringing in our steel coffin. The gunner was sobbing. The driver was frozen. Commander, a junior sergeant, just 20 years old, was balled up on the floor, clutching the little cross he had around his neck. I put my hand on top of his head, assured him we would be fine while keeping my eyes glued to the periscope. RVX doesn't start out as a gas, you see. It starts out as a rain, tiny, oily droplets that cling to whatever they contact. It enters through the pores, the eyes, the lungs. Depending on the dosage, the effects can be instantaneous. I could see the evacuees' limbs begin to tremble, arms falling to their sides as the agent worked its way through their central nervous system. They rubbed their eyes, fought to speak, move, breathe. I was glad I couldn't smell the contents of their undergarment. Sudden discharge of bladder and bowel. Why would they do it? Couldn't understand. Didn't High Command know that the chemical weapons had no effect on the undead? Didn't they learn everything from Zitomir? The first corpse to move was a woman, just a second or more before the others. A twitching hand groping across the back of a man who looked like he'd been trying to shield her. He slipped off as she rose on uncertain knees. Her face was mottled and webbed with blackened veins. I think she saw me, or our tank. Her jaw dropped, her arms rose. I could see the others coming to life. Every 40th or 50th person. Everyone who had been bitten and had previously tried to conceal it. And then I understood. Yes, they'd learned from Zitomir. Now they found a better use for their Cold War stockpiles. How do you effectively separate the infected from the others? How do you keep evacuees from spreading the infection behind the line? That's one way. They were starting to fully reanimate, regaining their footing, shuffling slowly across the bridge toward us. I called for the gunner. He could barely stutter a response. I kicked him in the back, barked the order to sight his targets. It took a few seconds, but he settled his crosshairs on the first woman and squeezed the trigger. I held my triggers as the coax fell. The other tanks followed suit. 20 minutes later, it was over. I know I should have waited for orders, or at least reported our status or the effects of the strike. I could see 6 more flights of rooks streaking over. 5 heading for the other bridges, the last for the city center. I ordered our company to withdraw, to head southwest and just keep going. There were a lot of bodies around us, ones who just made it over the bridge before the gas hit. They popped as we ran over them. Have you been to the Great Patriotic War Museum complex? It was one of the most impressive buildings in Kiev. The courtyard was filled with machines, tanks, guns. Every class and size, from the Revolution to the modern day. 2 tanks faced each other at the museum's entrance. They were decorated with colorful drawings now, and children were allowed to climb and play them. There was an iron cross, a full meter in size, made from the hundreds of real iron crosses taken from dead Hitlerites. There was a mural from floor to ceiling, showing a grand battle. Our soldiers were all connected in a seething wave of strength, courage, crashed upon the German that drove them from our homeland. So many symbols of our national defense, and none more spectacular than the statue of Rodina Mat, the motherland. She was the tallest building in the city, more than 60-meter masterpiece of pure stainless steel. She was the last thing I saw in Kiev, her shield and sword held high in everlasting triumph, her cold, bright eyes looking down at us as we ran. Now, I'm going to pause briefly here for one moment, folks, as I'm going to run the 3-minute ads so that there is no interruptions for a full hour. So my humblest apologies for the early ad break. We're going to get it out the way now so that we have a nice uninterrupted hour before we have to get more. So we'll be right back. And I'm going to be right back myself to take care of something. Okay. Why did it only run the... Why did it only run the 1-minute ad? Okay. Wait, I know why. I know why. Yeah, I ran the wrong ad break. Okay. This is done. I'll keep going for another 30 minutes and then we'll run the 30-minute one, so apologies for this, folks. Get back to going here in uno momento. There we go. Okay. And people should be back by now. So let's keep going. Sand Lakes Provincial Wilderness Park, Manitoba, Canada. Pretext. Jessica Hendricks gestures to the expanse of subarctic wasteland. The natural beauty has been replaced by wreckage, abandoned vehicles, debris. Human corpses remain partially frozen to the gray snow and ice. Originally from Waukesha, Wisconsin, the now naturalized Canadian is part of this region's wilderness restoration project. Along with several hundred other volunteers, she has come here every summer since the end of official hostilities. Although the WRP claims to have made substantial progress, none can claim to see any end in sight. End of pretext. I don't blame them, the government, the people who were supposed to protect us. Objectively, I guess I can understand. They couldn't have everyone following the army west behind the Rocky Mountain. How were they going to feed all of us? How were they going to screen us? And how could they ever hope to stop the armies of undead that almost certainly would have been following us? I can understand why they would want to divert as many refugees north as possible. What else could they do? Stop us at the Rockies with armed troops? Gas us like the Ukrainians? At least if we went north, we might have a chance. Once the temperature dropped and the undead froze, some of us might be able to survive. That was happening all around the rest of the world. People fleeing north, hoping to stay alive until winter came. No, I don't blame them for wanting to divert us. I can forgive that. But the irresponsible way they did it, the lack of vital information that would have helped so many of us stay alive, that I can never forgive. It was August, 2 weeks after Yonkers, and just 3 days after the government had started withdrawing west. We hadn't had too many outbreaks in our neighborhood. I'd only seen one. A collection of 6 feeding on a homeless man. The cops had put them down quickly. It happened 3 blocks from our house, and that was when my father decided to leave. We were in the living room. My father was learning how to load his new rifle, while Mom finished nailing up the windows. You couldn't find a channel, anything but zombie news. Either live images or recorded footage from Yonkers. Looking back, I still can't believe how unprofessional the news media was. So much spin, so few hard facts. All those digestible sound bites from an army of quote-unquote experts, all contradicting one another, all trying to seem more shocking and in-depth than the last one. It was all so confusing. Nobody seemed to know what to do. The only thing any of them could agree on was that all private citizens should go north. Because the living dead freeze solid, extreme cold is our only hope. That's all we heard. No more instructions on where to head north, what to bring with us, how to survive. Just that damn catchphrase you'd hear from every talking head, or just crawling all over and over across the bottom of the TV. Go north, go north, go north. That's it, Dad said. We're getting out of here tonight and heading north. He tried to sound determined, slapping his rifle. He'd never touched a gun in his life. He was a gentleman in the most literal sense. He was a gentle man. Short, bald, a pudgy face that turned red when he laughed. He was the king of the bad jokes and cheesy one-liners. He always had something for you, a compliment or a smile, or a little extension to my allowance that Mom wasn't supposed to know about. He was the good cop in the family. He left all the big decisions to Mom. Now Mom tried to argue, tried to make him see reason. We lived above the snow line. We had all we needed. Why trek into the unknown when we could just stock up on supplies, continue to fortify the house, and just wait until the first fall frost? Dad wouldn't hear it. We could be dead by the fall. Dead by next week. He was so caught up in the Great Panic. He told us it would be like an extended camping trip. We'd live on moose burgers and wild berry desserts. He promised to teach me how to fish. Asked what I wanted to name my pet rabbit when I caught it. He'd lived in Waukesha his whole life. He'd never been camping. She shows me something in the ice, a collection of cracked DVDs. This is what people brought with them. Hair dryers, GameCube, laptops by the dozen. I don't think they were stupid enough to think they could use them. Maybe some did. I think most people were just afraid of losing them. That they'd come home after 6 months and find their homes looted. We actually thought we were packing sensibly. Warm clothes, cooking utensils, things from the medicine cabinet, and all of the canned food we could carry. It looked like enough food for a couple of years. We finished half of it on the way up. That didn't bother me. It was like an adventure, the trek north. All those stories you hear about the clogged roads and violence, that wasn't us. We were in the first wave. The only people ahead of us were the Canadians, and most of them were already long gone. There was still a lot of traffic on the road, more cars than I'd ever seen, but it all moved pretty quickly, and only really snarled in places like roadside towns or parks. Parks? Parks. Designated campgrounds. Any place where people thought they'd gone far enough. Dad used to look down on those people, calling them short-sighted and irrational. He said we were still way too close to population centers, and the only way to really make it was to head as far north as we could. Mom would always argue that it wasn't their fault, that most of them had simply run out of gas. And whose fault is that? Dad would say. We had a lot of spare gas cans. I'm going to pause for a moment because this stupid bot has triggered ads. Okay, we're going to pause here for a moment, and we're going to get this out the way. Okay, as soon as this ad break is done, I'm going to run the 3-minute one, just to get it out, just to force it to get out the way. Where would you go, chat? If you knew the zombies were coming, you knew you could survive in a cold environment, where would you try to go to survive? Would you head to Canada? Would you try to go further seas? Would you go to the sea? What do you think? There we go. Nope, can't find it yet. Okay, we're going to go to the end of this chapter, and then we're going to pause, and then we'll run the 3-minute ad break. So, let's keep going. We had a lot of spare gas cans on the roof of the minivan. Dad had been stocking up since the first days of the panic. We'd passed a lot of traffic snarls around roadside gas stations, most of which already had these giant signs outside that said no more gas. Dad drove by them really fast. He drove fast by a lot of things. The stalled cars that needed a jump, hitchhikers who needed a ride. There were a lot of those. In some cases, walking in lines by the side of the road, looking like the way you think refugees are supposed to look. Every now and then, a car would stop to pick up a couple, and suddenly everyone wanted a ride. See what they got themselves into? That was Dad. We did pick up one woman walking by herself, pulling one of those wheeled airline bags. She looked pretty harmless, all alone in the rain. That's probably why Mom made Dad stop her up. Her name was Patty. She was from Winnipeg. She didn't tell us how she got here, and we didn't ask. She was really grateful, tried to give my parents all the money she had. Mom wouldn't let her, promised to take her as far as we were going. She started crying, thanking us. I was proud of my parents for doing the right thing. Until she sneezed and brought up a handkerchief to blow her nose. Her left hand had been in her pocket since we picked her up. We could see that it was wrapped in a cloth, a dark stain that looked like blood. She saw that we saw, and suddenly looked nervous. She told us not to worry, that she just cut it by accident. Dad looked at Mom, and they both got very quiet. They wouldn't look at me. They didn't say anything. That night, I woke up when I heard the passenger door slam shut. I didn't think it was anything unusual. We were always stopping for bathroom breaks. He always woke me up just in case I had to go. But this time, I didn't know what had happened till the minivan was already moving. I looked around for Patty, but she was gone. I asked my parents what had happened. They told me she'd asked them to drop her off. I looked behind her, and I thought I could just make her out. This little speck getting smaller each second. I thought she looked like she was running after us, but I was so tired and confused, couldn't be sure. I probably just didn't want to know. I shut a lot out during that drive north. Like what? Like the other quote-unquote hitchhikers. The ones who didn't run. There weren't a lot, I remember. We're talking about the first wave. We encountered half a dozen at most, wandering down the middle of the road, raising their arms when we got close. Dad would weave around them. Mom would tell me to get my head down. Never saw them too close. I had my face against the seat and my eyes shut. I didn't want to see them. I just kept thinking about moose burgers and wild berries. It was like heading to the promised land. I knew once we headed far enough north, everything would be all right. For a little while, it was. We had this great campsite right on the shore of a lake. Not too many people around, just enough to make us feel safe. You know, if any of the dead showed up. Everyone was real friendly. This big collective vibe of relief. It was kind of like a party at first. There were these big cookouts every night. People all throwing in what they'd hunted or fished. Mostly fished. Some guys would throw dynamite in the lake. There'd be this huge bang, and all these fish would come floating to the surface. I'll never forget those sounds. The explosion, or the chainsaws as people cut down trees, or the musics of car radios and instruments families had brought. We all sang around the campfires at night, these giant bonfires of logs stacked up on one another. That was when we still had trees. Before the second and third waves started showing up, when people were down to burning leaves and stumps, then finally whatever they could get their hands on. The smell of plastic and rubber got really bad. In your mouth, in your hair. By that time, fish were all gone, and anything left for people to hunt. No one seemed to worry. Everyone was counting on winter freezing the dead. But once the dead were frozen, how were you going to survive the winter? Good question. I don't think most people thought that far ahead. Maybe they figured that the authorities would come rescue us, or that they could just pack up and head home. I'm sure a lot of people didn't think about anything except the day in front of them, just grateful that they were finally safe and confident things would work themselves out. We'll all be home before you know it, people would say. It'll all be over by Christmas. She draws my attention to another object on the ice. SpongeBob SquarePants sleeping bag. It is small and stained brown. What do you think this is rated to? Heated bedroom at a sleepover party. Oh, sorry, what do you think this is rated to? A heated bedroom at a sleepover party? Okay, maybe they couldn't get a proper bag. Camping stores were always the first bought out or knocked on. But you can't believe how ignorant some of these people were. A lot of them were from Sunbelt states, some as far away as southern Mexico. You'd see people getting into their sleeping bags with their boots on, not realizing it was cutting off their circulation. You'd see them drinking to get warm, not realizing it was actually lowering their temperature by releasing more body heat. You'd see them wearing these big heavy coats with nothing but a t-shirt underneath. They'd do something physical, overheat, take off the coat. Their bodies would be coated in sweat. A lot of cotton cloth holding in the moisture. The breeze had come up. A lot of people got sick that first September. Cold and flu. Then they gave it to the rest of us. In the beginning, everyone was friendly. We traded or even bought what we needed from other families. Money was still worth something. Everyone thought the banks would be reopening soon. Whenever Mom and Dad would go looking for food, they'd always leave me with a neighbor. I had this little survival radio, the kind you cranked for power, so we could listen to the news every night. It was all stories of the pullout, army units leaving people stranded. We'd listen with our roadmap of the United States, pointing to the cities and towns where the reports were coming from. I'd sit on Dad's lap. See, he'd say, they didn't get out in time. They weren't smart like us. He tried to force a smile. For a little while, I thought he was right. But after the first month, when the food started running out and the days got colder and darker, people started getting mean. There were no more communal fires, no more cookouts or singing. The camp became a mess. Nobody picked up their trash anymore. A couple of times I stepped in human shit. Nobody was even bothering to bury it. I wasn't left alone with my neighbors anymore. My parents didn't trust anyone. Things got dangerous. You'd see a lot of fights. I saw two women wrestling over a fur coat, tore it right down the middle. I saw one guy catching another guy trying to steal some stuff out of his car and beat his head in with a tire iron. A lot of it took place at night. Scuffling and shouts. Every now and then you'd hear a gunshot, somebody crying. One time, we heard someone moving outside the makeshift tent we draped over the minivan. Mom told me to put my head down and cover my ears. Dad went outside. Through my hands, I heard shouts. Dad's gun went off. Someone screamed. Dad came back. His face was white. Never asked him what happened. The only time anyone ever came together was when one of the dead showed up. They were the ones who'd followed the third wave, coming alone or in small packs. Happened every couple of days. Someone would sound an alarm, and everyone would rally to take them out. And then, as soon as it was over, we'd all turn on each other again. When it got cold enough to freeze the lake, when the last of the dead stopped showing up, a lot of people thought it was safe enough to walk home. Walk? Not drive? No more gas. They'd used it all up for cooking fuel or just to keep their car heaters running. Every day there'd be these groups of half-starved, ragged wretches, all loaded down with all this useless stuff they'd brought with them, and with this look of desperate hope on their faces. Where do they think they're going? Dad would say. Don't they know that it hasn't gotten cold enough farther south? Don't they know what's still waiting for them back there? He was convinced that if we just held out long enough, sooner or later things would get better. That was in October, when I still looked like a human being. We came upon a collection of bones. too many to count. They lie in a pit, half covered in ice. I was a pretty kid. I was a pretty heavy kid. I never played sports. I lived on fast food and snacks. I was only a little bit thinner when we arrived in August. By November, I was like a skeleton. Mom and Dad didn't look much better. Dad's tummy was gone. Mom had these narrow cheekbones. They were fighting a lot, fighting about everything. That scared me more than anything. They'd never raised their voices at home. They were school teachers, quote-unquote progressives. There might have been a tense, quiet dinner every now and then, but nothing like this. They went for each other every chance they had. One time, around Thanksgiving, I couldn't get out of my sleeping bag. My stomach was swollen, and I had these sores on my mouth and nose. There was this smell coming from the neighbor's RV. They were cooking something. Meat. It smelled really good. Mom and Dad were outside arguing. Mom said it was the only way. I didn't know what it was. She said it wasn't that bad because the neighbors, not us, had been the ones to actually do it. Dad said we weren't going to stoop to that level and that Mom should be ashamed of herself. Mom really laid into Dad, screeching that it was all his fault that we were here, that I was dying. Mom told him that a real man would know what to do. She called him a wimp and said he wanted us to die so that he could run away and live like the F word she always knew he was. Dad told her to shut the fuck up. Dad never swore. I heard something. A crack outside. Mom came back in, holding a clump of snow over her right eye. Dad followed her. He didn't say anything. He had this look on his face I'd never seen before. Like he was a different person. He grabbed my survival radio, the one people tried to buy or steal for a long time, went back out toward the RV. He came back 10 minutes later without the radio, but with a big bucket of steaming hot stew. It was so good. Mom told me not to eat too fast. She fed me in little spoonfuls. She looked relieved. She was crying a little. Dad still had that look. The look I had myself in a few months. When Mom and Dad both got sick, I had to feed them. I kneeled to examine the bone pile. They had all been broken. Marrow extracted. Winter really hit us in early December. The snow was over our heads, literally mountains of it, thick and grey from the pollution. The camp got silent. No more shooting, no more fights. By Christmas Day, there was plenty of food. She holds up what looks like a miniature femur that has been scraped clean by a knife. They say 11 million people died that winter, and that's just in North America. That doesn't count the other places. Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia. I don't want to think about Siberia. All those refugees from southern China. The ones from Japan who'd never been outside a city. And all those poor people from India. That was the first grey winter. The filth in the sky started to change the weather. They say that a part of that filth, I don't know how much, was ash from human remains. She plants a marker above the bone pit. It took a lot of time, but eventually the sun did come out. The weather began to warm. The snow finally began to melt. By mid July, spring was finally here, and so was the living dead. One of the team members calls us over. The zombie is half buried, frozen from the waist down in the ice. The head, arms, and upper torso are very much alive, thrashing and moaning, trying to claw back towards us. Why do they come back after freezing? All human cells contain water, right? And when that water freezes, it expands and bursts the cell walls. That's why you can't just freeze people and suspend their animation. So then why does it work for the living dead? The zombie makes one great lunge in our direction. Its frozen lower torso begins to snap. Jessica raises her weapon, a long iron crowbar, and casually smashes the creature's skull. Okay, that is the end of that chapter. We're going to run the 3-minute ad break now, which will give us a solid hour of chill time. So if anyone wants to get any drinks or take a stand-up or anything like that, now will be the time to do it. And we will see you all in 3 minutes. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go make my own tea.
We are back. Okay. And now, let's keep going. Hope everyone's back from the ads.
Udaipur Lake Palace, Lake Picola, Rajasthan, India. Pretext. Completely covering its foundation of Jagnua Island, this idyllic, almost fairy tale structure was once a Maharaja's residence, then a luxury hotel, then a haven to several hundred refugees, until an outbreak of cholera killed them all. Under the direction of project manager Sardar Khan, the hotel, like the lake and surrounding city, is finally beginning to return to life. During his recollection, Mr. Khan sounds less like a battle-hardened, highly educated civilian engineer, and more like a young, frightened lance corporal who once found himself on a chaotic mountain road. End of pretext. I remember the monkeys, hundreds of them, climbing and skittering among the vehicles, even over the tops of people's heads. I'd watch them as far back, Chandragarh, leaping from roofs and balconies as the living dead filled the street. I remember them scattering, chattering, scrambling straight up telephone poles to escape the zombies' grasping arms. Some didn't even wait to be attacked. They knew. And now they were here on this narrow, twisting Himalayan goat track. They called it a road, but even in peacetime, it had been a notorious death trap. Thousands of refugees were streaming past or climbing over the stalled and abandoned vehicles. People were still trying to struggle with suitcases, boxes. One man was stubbornly holding on to the monitor for a desktop PC. Monkey landed on his head, trying to use it as a stepping stone, but the man was too close to the edge, and the two of them went tumbling over the side. It seemed like every second someone would lose their footing. There were just too many people. The road didn't even have a guardrail. I saw a whole bus go over. I don't even know how. It wasn't even moving. Passengers were climbing out of the windows because the doors of the bus had been jammed by foot traffic. One woman was halfway out the window when the bus tipped over. Something was in her arms. Something clutched tightly to her. I tell myself that it wasn't moving or crying, that it was just a bundle of clothes. No one within arm's reach tried to help her. No one even looked. They just kept streaming by. Sometimes I dream about that moment, and I can't tell the difference between them and the monkeys. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't even a combat engineer. I was with the BRO-1. My job was to build roads, not blow them up. I'd just been wandering through the assembly area at Shimla, trying to find what remained of my unit, and this engineer, Sergeant Mukherjee, grabbed me up by the arm and said, "You, soldier, you know how to drive." I think I stammered something to the affirmative, and suddenly he was shoving me into the driver's side of a jeep while he jumped in next to me with some kind of radio-like device on his lap. "Get back to the pass! Go, go!" I took off down the road, reaching and skidding, and trying desperately to explain that I was actually a steamroller driver, and not even fully qualified at that. Mukherjee didn't hear me. He was too busy fiddling with the device on his lap. "The charges are already set," he explained. "All we have to do is wait for the order." "What charges?" I asked. "What order?" "To blow the pass, you arsehead! He yelled, motioning what I now recognized as a detonator on his lap. How the hell else are we going to stop them? I knew, vaguely, that our retreat into the Himalayas had something to do with some kind of master plan, and that part of that plan meant closing all living passes to living dead. I never dreamed, however, that I would be such a vital participant. For the sake of civil conversation, I will not repeat my profane reaction to Mukherjee, nor Mukherjee's equally profane reaction when we arrived at the pass and found it still full of refugees. It's supposed to be clear, he shouted. No more refugees. We noticed a soldier from the Rashtriya Rifle, the outfit that was supposed to be securing the road's mountain entrance, running past the jeep. Mukherjee jumped out and grabbed the man. What the hell is this? He asked. He was a big man, tough. You were supposed to keep the road clear. The other man was just as angry, just as scared. You want to shoot your grandmother? Go ahead. He shoved the sergeant aside, kept going. Mukherjee keyed his radio and reported that the road was still highly active. A voice came back to him, high-pitched, frantic younger voice of an officer screaming that his orders were to blow the road, no matter how many people were on it. Mukherjee responded angrily that he had to wait until it was clear. If we blew it now, not only would we be sending dozens of people hurtling to their deaths, but we would be trapping thousands on the other side. The voice shot back that the road would never be clear, that the only thing behind those people was a raging swarm of God knows how many million zombies. Mukherjee answered that he would not blow it until the zombies got there, and not a second before. He wasn't about to commit murder, no matter what some pissant lieutenant. But then, Mukherjee stopped in mid-sentence and looked at something over my head. I whipped around and suddenly found myself staring into the face of General Raj Singh. I didn't know where he came from, why he was there. To this day, no one believes me. Not that he wasn't there, but that I was. I was inches away from him, from the Tiger of Delhi. I've heard that people tend to view those they respect as appearing physically taller than they actually are. In my mind, he appears as a virtual giant, even with his torn uniform, his bloody turban, the patch on his right eye, and the bandage on his nose. One of his men had smashed him in the face to get him on the last chopper out of Gandhi Park. General Raj Singh. Khan takes a deep breath, his chest filling with pride. Gentlemen, he began. He called us gentlemen, and explained very carefully that the road had to be destroyed immediately. The Air Force, what was left of it, had its own orders concerning the closure of all mountain passes. At this moment, a single Shamshir fighter bomber was already on station above our position. We found ourselves unable, unwilling to accomplish our mission. Then the Jaguar's pilot was ordered to execute Shiva's wrath. Do you know what this means? Raj Singh asked. Maybe he thought I was too young to understand. Maybe he must have guessed, somehow, that I was Muslim. But even if I'd known absolutely nothing about the Hindu deity of destruction, everyone in uniform had heard rumors about the secret, quote-unquote, code name for the use of thermonuclear weapons. Wouldn't that have destroyed the pass? Yes, and half the mountain as well. Instead of a narrow choke point hemmed in by sheer cliff walls, you would have had little more than a massive, gently sloping ramp. The whole point of destroying these roads was to create a barrier inaccessible to the living dead, and now some ignorant Air Force general with an atomic erection was going to give them the perfect entrance right into the safe zone. Makerji gulped, not sure of what to do, until the tiger held out his hand for the detonator. Ever the hero, he was now willing to accept the burden of mass murder. The sergeant handed it over, close to tears. General Raj Singh thanked us both, whispered a prayer, then pressed his thumbs down on the firing buttons. Nothing happened. He tried again. No response. Checked the batteries, all the connections, and tried a third time. Nothing. The problem wasn't the detonator. Something had gone wrong with the charges that were buried half a kilometer down the road, set right in the middle of the refugees. This is the end, I thought. We're all going to die. All I could think of was getting out of there, far enough away to maybe avoid the nuclear blast. I still feel guilty about those thoughts, caring only for myself in a moment like that. Thank God for General Raj Singh. He reacted exactly how you expect a living legend to react. He ordered us to get out of here, save ourselves, and get to Shimla, then turned and ran right into the crowd. Makerji and I looked at each other without much hesitation, I'm happy to say, and took off after him. Now we wanted to be heroes too, to protect our general and shield him from the crowd. Joke. We never even saw him once the masses enveloped us like a raging river. I was pushed and shoved from all directions. I don't know when I was punched in the eye. Shouted that I needed to get past, that this was army business. No one listened. I fired several shots in the air. No one noticed. I considered actually firing into the crowd. I was becoming as desperate as them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mukherjee go tumbling over the side, another man still fighting for his rifle. I turned to tell General Raj Singh, but couldn't find him in the crowd. I called his name, tried to spot him above the other heads, climbed onto the roof of a microbus, trying to get my bearings. Then the wind came up, brought this stink and moan, whipping through the valley. In front of me, about half a kilometer ahead, the crowd began running. I strained my eyes, squinted. The dead were coming. Slow and deliberate, just as tightly packed as the refugees they were devouring. The microbus shook and I fell. First, I was floating on a sea of human bodies, and then suddenly I was beneath them. Shoes and bare feet trampling on my flesh. I felt my ribs crack, coughed and tasted blood. I pulled myself under the microbus, my body aching and burning. I couldn't speak. I could barely see. I heard the sound of the approaching zombies. I guessed that it couldn't be more than 200 meters away. I swore I wouldn't die like the others, all those victims torn to pieces. The cow I saw struggling and bleeding on the banks of the Satluj River in Rupnagar. I fumbled for my sidearm. My hand wouldn't work. cursed and cried. I thought I'd be religious at that point, but I was just so angry and scared, I started beating my head against the underside of the van. I thought if I hit it hard enough, I could bash my own skull. Suddenly, there was a deafening roar, and the ground rose up underneath me. A wave of screams and moans mixed with this powerful blast of pressurized dust. My face slammed into the machinery above, knocking me cold. The first thing I remember when I came to was a very faint sound. First, I thought it was water. It sounded like a fast drip. Tap, tap, like that. But the tap became clearer, and suddenly I became aware of two other sounds. The crackle of my radio. How that wasn't smashed, I'll never know. And the ever-present howling of the living dead. I crawled out from under the microbus. At least my legs were still working well enough to stand. I realized I was alone. No refugees. No General Raj Singh. I was standing among a collection of discarded personal belongings in the middle of a deserted mountain path. In front of me was a charred cliff wall. Beyond it was the other side of the severed road. That's where the moan was coming from. The living dead were still coming for me. With eyes front and arms outstretched, they were falling in droves over the shattered edge. That was the tapping sound. Their bodies smashing on the valley floor below. The tiger must have set the demolition charges off by hand. I guess he must have reached them same time as the living dead. I hope they didn't get their teeth in him first. I hope he's pleased with his statue that now stands over a modern 4-lane mountain freeway. I wasn't thinking about his sacrifice at that moment. I wasn't sure if any of this was real. Staring silently at this undead waterfall, listening to my radio report other units. Vikasnagar, secure. Bilaspur, secure. Jawalamukhi, secure. All passes report secure. Over. Am I dreaming, I thought? Am I insane? The monkeys didn't help matters any. He was sitting on top of the microbus, just watching the undead plunge to their end. His face appeared so serene, so intelligent, as if he truly understood the situation. I almost wanted him to turn to me and say, "This is the turning point of the war. We've finally stopped them. We're finally safe." But instead, his little penis popped out and he peed in my face. House, New Mexico. Pretext. Arthur Sinclair, Jr. is the picture of an old-world patrician. Tall, lean, with close-cropped white hair and an affected Harvard accent. He speaks into the ether, rarely making eye contact, pausing for questions. During the war, Mr. Sinclair was director of the U.S. government's newly formed DESTRES, or Department of Strategic Resources. End of pretext. I don't know who first thought of the acronym DESTRES, or if they consciously knew how much it sounded like distress, but it certainly could not have been more appropriate. Establishing a defensive line at the Rocky Mountains might have created a theoretical safe zone, but in reality, that zone consisted mainly of rubble and refugees. There was starvation, homelessness in the millions. Industry was in shambles. Transportation and trade had evaporated. And all of this was compounded by the living dead, both assaulting the rocky line and festering within our safe zone. We had to get our people on their feet again. Clothed, fed, housed, and back to work. Otherwise, this supposed safe zone was only forestalling the inevitable. That was why the distress was created. And as you can imagine, I had to do a lot of on-the-job training. Those first months, I can't tell you how much information I had to cram into this withered old cortex. The briefings, the inspection tours. When I did sleep, it was with a book under my pillow. Each night, a new one, from Henry J. Kaiser to Von Yun Gap. I needed every idea, every word, every ounce of knowledge and wisdom to help me fuse the fractured landscape into the modern American world. If my father had been alive, he probably would have laughed at my frustration. He'd been a staunch New Dealer, working closely with FDR as comptroller of New York State. He used methods that were almost Marxist in nature, the kind of collectivization that would make Ayn Rand leap from her grave and join the ranks of the living dead. I'd always rejected the lessons he tried to impart, running as far away as Wall Street to shut them out. Now, I was racking my brains to remember them. One thing those New Dealers did better than any generation in American history was find and harvest the right tools and talent. Tools and talent? A term my son had heard once in a movie. I found it described our reconstruction efforts rather well. Talent describes the potential workforce, its level of skilled labor, and how that labor could be utilized effectively. To be perfectly candid, our supply of talent was at a critical low. Ours was a post-industrial, service-based economy, so complex and highly specialized that each individual could only function within the confines of its narrow, compartmentalized structure. You should have seen some of the quote-unquote careers listed on our first employment census. Everyone was some version of an executive, a representative, an analyst, or a consultant, all perfectly suited to the pre-war world, but all totally inadequate for the present crisis. We needed carpenters, masons, machinists, gunsmiths. We had those people, to be sure, not nearly as many as were necessary. The first labor survey stated clearly that over 65% of the present civilian workforce were classified F6, possessing no valued vocation. We required a massive job retraining program. In short, we needed to get a lot of white collars dirty. It was slow going. Air traffic was non-existent. Roads and rail lines were a shambles. Fuel, good lord, you couldn't find a tank between Blaine, Washington, and Imperial Beach, California. Add to this the fact that pre-war America not only had a commuter-based infrastructure, that such a method also allowed for severe levels of economic segregation. You would have entire suburban neighborhoods of upper middle class professionals, none of whom had possessed even the basic know-how to replace a cracked window. Those with that knowledge lived in their own blue-collar, quote-unquote, ghettos, an hour away in pre-war auto traffic, which translated to at least a full day on foot. Make no mistake, bipedal locomotion was how most people traveled in the beginning. Solving this problem, no, challenge, there are no problems, was the refugee camps. There were hundreds of them, some parking lot small, some spreading for miles, scattered across the mountains and coast, all requiring government assistance, all huge drains on rapidly diminishing resources. At the top of my list, before I tackled any other challenges, these camps had to be emptied. Anyone F6 but physically able became unskilled labor, clearing rubble, harvesting crops, digging graves. A lot of graves needed to be dug. Anyone A1, those with war-appropriate skills, became part of our CSSP, or Community Self-Sufficiency Program, a mixed group of instructors who would be tasked with infusing these sedentary, overeducated, desk-bound, cubicle mice with the knowledge necessary to make it on their own. It was an instant success. Within 3 months, you saw a marked drop in requests for government aid. I can't stress how vital this was to victory. It allowed us to transition from a zero-sum, survival-based economy into full-blown war production. This was the National Re-Education Act, the organic outgrowth of the CSSP. I'd say it was the largest jobs training program since the Second World War, and easily the most radical in our history. You've mentioned on occasion the problems faced by the NRA. I was getting to that. The president gave me the kind of power I needed to meet any physical or logistical challenge. Unfortunately, what neither he nor anyone on Earth could give me was the power to change the way people thought. As I explained, America was a segregated workforce, and in many cases, that segregation contained a cultural element. A great many of our instructors were first-generation immigrants. They were the people who knew how to take care of themselves, how to survive on very little and work with what they had. These were the people who tended small gardens in their backyards, repaired their own homes, who kept their appliances running for as long as mechanically possible. It was crucial that these people teach the rest of us to break from our comfortable, disposable consumer lifestyle, even though their labor had allowed us to maintain that lifestyle in the first place. Yes, there was racism. There was also classism. You're a high-powered corporate attorney. You've spent most of your life reviewing contracts, brokering deals, talking on the phone. That's what you're good at. That's what made you rich and allowed you to hire a plumber to fix your toilet, which allowed you to keep talking on the phone. The more work you do, the more money you make, the more peons you hire to free you up to make more money. That's the way the world works. But one day, it doesn't. No one needs a contract reviewed or a deal brokered. What it does need is toilets fixed. And suddenly, that peon, your teacher, maybe even your boss. For some, this was scarier than the living dead. Once, on a fact-finding tour through LA, I sat in the back of a re-education lecture. The trainees had all held lofty positions in the entertainment industry. a melange of agents, managers, quote unquote, creative executives, whatever the hell that means. I can understand their resistance, their arrogance. Before the war, entertainment had been the most valued export of the United States. Now, they were being trained as custodians for a munitions plant in Bakersfield, California. One woman, casting director, exploded. How dare they degrade her like this? She had an MFA in conceptual theater. She had cast the top 3 grossing sitcoms in the last 5 seasons, and she had made more in her week than her instructor could dream of in several lifetimes. She kept addressing that instructor by her first name. Magda, she kept saying. Magda, enough already. Magda, please. At first, I thought this woman was just being rude, degrading the instructor by refusing to use her title. Found out later that Mrs. Magda Anatova used to be this woman's cleaning lady. Yes, it was very hard for some, but a lot of them later admitted they got more emotional satisfaction from their new jobs than anything closely resembling their old one. I met one gentleman on a coastal ferry from Portland to Seattle. He had worked in the licensing department for an advertising agency, specifically in charge of procuring the rights to classic rock songs for television commercials. Now, he was a chimney sweep. Given that most homes in Seattle had lost their central heat and the winters were now longer and colder, he was seldom idle. I help keep my neighbors warm, he said proudly. I know it sounds a little too Norman Rockwell, but I hear stories like that all the time. You see those shoes? I made them. That sweater? That's my sheep's wool. Like the corn? My garden. That was the upshot of a more localized system. It gave people the opportunity to see the fruits of their labor. It gave them a sense of individual pride, to know that they were making a clear, concrete contribution to victory. And it gave me a wonderful feeling that I was a part of that. I needed that feeling. It kept me sane for the other part of my job. So much for quote-unquote talent. Tools are the weapons of war, and the industrial and logistical means by which those weapons are constructed. He swivels in his chair, motioning to a picture above his desk. I lean closer and see that it's not a picture, but a framed label. Ingredients: molasses from the United States, anise from Spain, licorice from France, vanilla, bourbon from Madagascar, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, cloves from Indonesia, wintergreen from China, pimento berry oil from Jamaica, balsam oil from Peru. And that's just for a bottle of peacetime root beer. We're not talking about something like a desktop PC or a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Ask anyone how the Allies won the Second World War. Those with very little knowledge might answer that it was our numbers or generalship. Those without any knowledge might point to techno marvels like radar or the atom bomb. He scowls. Anyone with the most rudimentary understanding of that conflict will give you the 3 real reasons. First, the ability to manufacture more material, more bullets, beans, and bandages than the enemy. Second, the natural resources available to manufacture that material. And third, the logistical means to not only transport those resources to the factories, but also to transport the finished products out to the front lines. The Allies had the resources, industry, and logistics of an entire planet. The Axis, on the other hand, had to depend on what scant assets they could scrape up within their borders. This time, we were the Axis. The living dead controlled most of the world's landmass, while American war production depended on what could be harvested within the limits of the western states specifically. Forget raw materials from safe zones overseas. Our merchant fleet was crammed to the deck with refugees, while fuel shortages had dry docked most of our navy. We had some advantages. California's agricultural base could at least ease the problem of starvation, if it could be restructured. The citrus growers didn't go quietly, neither did the ranchers. The beef barons, who controlled so much prime potential farmland, were the worst. Did you ever hear of Don Hill? Ever see the movie Roy Elliott did on him? It was when the infestation hit the San Joaquin Valley, the dead swarming over his fences, attacking his cattle, and tearing them apart like African driver ants. And there he was, in the middle of it all, shooting and hollering like Gregory Peck in Duel in the Sun. I dealt with him openly and honestly, as with everyone else. Give him a choice. I reminded him that winter was coming, and there was still a lot of very hungry people out there. I warned him that when the hordes of starving refugees showed up to finish what the living dead started, he'd have no government protection whatsoever. Hill was a brave, stubborn bastard. He wasn't an idiot. He agreed to surrender his land and herd only on the condition that his and everyone else's breeding stock remained untouched. We shook on that. Tender, juicy steaks. Can you think of a better icon of our pre-war artificial standard of living? And yet, it was that standard that ended up being our second great advantage. The only way to supplement our resource base was recycling. This was nothing new. The Israelis had started when they sealed their borders, and since then, each nation had adopted it to one degree or another. None of their stockpiles, however, could even compare to what we had at our disposal. Think about what life was like in the pre-war America. Even those considered middle class enjoyed, or took for granted, a level of material comfort unheard of by any other nation, any other time in human history. The clothing, the kitchenware, the electronics, the automobiles, just in the Los Angeles basin alone, outnumbered the pre-war population by 3 to 1. Cars poured in by the millions. Every house, every neighborhood. We had an entire industry of over 100,000 employees working 3 shifts, 7 days a week, collecting, cataloging, disassembling, storing, and shipping parts and pieces to factories all over the coast. And there was little trouble, like with the cattle ranchers, people not wanting to turn over their Hummers or vintage Italian midlife crisis mobiles. Funny, no gas to run them, but they still hung on to them anyway. It didn't bother me too much. They were a pleasure to deal with, compared to the military establishment. Of all my adversaries, easily the most tenacious were the ones in uniform. I never had direct control over any of their R&D. They were free to greenlight whatever they wanted, but given that almost all of their programs were farmed out to civilian contractors, and that those contractors depended on resources controlled by distress, I had de facto control. "You cannot mothball our stealth bombers," they would yell. "Who the blank do you think you are to cancel our production of tanks?" At first, I tried to reason with them. "The M1 Abrams has a jet engine. Where are you going to find that kind of fuel? Why do you need stealth aircraft against an enemy that doesn't have radar?" I tried to make them see that given what we had to work with, as opposed to what we were facing, we simply had to get our largest return on our investment. Their language, the most bang for our buck. They were insufferable. With their all-hours phone calls, or just showing up at my office unannounced. I guess I can't really blame them. Not after how we all treated them after the last brushfire war, and certainly not after almost having their asses handed to them at Yonkers. They were teetering on the edge of total collapse, and a lot of them just needed somewhere to vent. He grins confidently. "I started my career trading on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, so I can yell as hard and long as any professional drill sergeant. After each quote-unquote meeting, expect the call. The one I'd been both dreading and hoping for. "Mr. Sinclair, this is the president. I just want to thank you for your service and will no longer be requiring..." He chuckles. It never came. My guess, no one else wanted the job. His smile fades. I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes. I know I was too anal about the Air Force's D-Corps. I didn't understand their safety protocols or what dirigibles could really accomplish in undead warfare. All I knew was that with our negligible helium supply, the only cost-effective lift gas was hydrogen, and no way was I going to waste lives and resources on a fleet of modern-day Hindenburgs. I also had to be persuaded, by the president no less, to reopen the experimental cold fusion project at Livermore. He argued that even though a breakthrough was, at best, still decades away, planning for the future lets our people know there will be one. I was too conservative with two projects, and with others, I was far too liberal. Project Yellow Jacket. I still kick myself when I think about that one. These Silicon Valley eggheads, all of them geniuses in their own field, convinced me that they had a wonder weapon, that they could win the war, theoretically, within 48 hours of deployment. They could build micro missiles, millions of them, about the size of a .22 rimfire bullet, that could be scattered from transport aircraft, then guided by satellites to the brain of every zombie in America. Sounds amazing, right? It did to me. He grumbles to himself. When I think of what we poured down that hole, what we could have produced instead. No point in dwelling in it now. I could have gone head-to-head against the military for the duration of the war, but I'm grateful in the end that I didn't have to. When Travis D'Ambrosia became chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he not only invented the resource-to-kill ratio, but developed a comprehensive strategy to employ it. I always listened to him when he told me a certain weapon system was vital. I trusted his opinion in matters like the new battle dress uniform or the standard infantry rifle. What was so amazing of how the culture of the RKR began to take hold among the rank and file. You'd hear soldiers talking on the street, in bars, on the train. I have X when for the same price we could have 10 Ys, which could kill 100 times as many Zs. Soldiers even began coming up with ideas on their own, inventing more cost-effective tools than we could have envisioned. I think they enjoyed it, improvising, adapting, outthinking us bureaucrats. The Marines surprised me the most. I'd always bought into the myth of the stupid jarhead, the knuckle-dragging, locked-jaw, testosterone-driven Neanderthal. I never knew that because the Corps always has to procure its assets through the Navy, and because admirals are never going to get too fired up about land warfare, that improvisation has to be one of their most treasured virtues. Sinclair points above my head to the opposite wall. On it hangs a heavy steel rod, ending in what looks like a shovel and a fusion of shovel and a double-headed black. Its official designation is the Standard Infantry Entrenchment Tool, though to most it is known as either the lobotomizer, simply the Lobo. The Leathernecks came up with that one, using nothing but the steel of recycled cars. We made 23 million during the war. He smiles with pride. And they're still making them today.
Okay, we're gonna take a brief break there, folks, to get the ads out the way, as it is just coming up to that time. Thank you so much, Rat King. Oh my god, the tier 2! Thank you so much for the... I was actually just about to trigger myself. Thank you for the tier 2 sub, buddy, for 9 months at that. God damn. That was a really... that was a really cool chapter. That was super, super interesting to listen to. I love the resource to kill ratio. That is super fun. Yes, the Project Yellow Jacket was that was something. That was something special. What the fuck? Why? Why did that sound? The fuck? Well, it was made up by General Jimmy. That's the thing. It was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs came up with it. So it was very much not a tech pro. It was a big old general. Oh, have some tea anyway. Give my throat a chance to calm down. My voice. I got talked into it. Rat King. Someone wanted it. Yeah, if you were listening to the stories, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he came up, and especially if you can get an idea into the, as they say, the cultural zeitgeist, into the minds of the people, it's so much easier to implement those ideas. Like, the fact that I love the fact that the resource to kill ratio basically filtered down through the rank and file and allowed them to start coming up with stuff to the point where they literally came up with a 40k weapon, essentially. A shovel with a battle axe. Like, that's the most badass thing I've ever heard of. Oh my god. Oh. I'm gonna give it another minute or two. Yeah, exactly. It's how much resources are we pouring into a soldier, and what are we getting out of it? You know, kind of scary. But yes, America is doing what it's doing best in the war and becoming the terrifyingly efficient resource machine that it is. Okay. Give you another minute there. Gives me a chance to stretch. I don't know, Dorn. I'm genuinely not sure. Yeah, whatever's going on. Yeah, you'll get a you'll get the terror ad, which will just claim you for like 3 hours straight or something like that. No, you know what you'll get. So 1 moment. If you remember those back when YouTube was still experimenting with the ads, you would sometimes get like 7 hour long Let's Plays just crammed into an ad for some reason. Like it would just be some dude's channel where he played like COD for 7 hours, and that would be the ad. And if you didn't skip it, it would actually play the full like 7.5 hours of a quote unquote ad. It was so dumb. I wish I'd recorded it when I was taking a screenshot when I saw it. It was so silly. Oh god. The shove axe. Axle's pretty good. It's already an actual word. Yeah, it does, Dorn, it does. I mean, the monolith almost claimed killer today, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, let me just move the camera in game. Make sure I'm not going to crash. I'm not going to tab out. Or AFK out, that's it. Okay. Alright. I'm a bit more tea, and then we'll keep going. Hope everyone's enjoying so far. And like I said, you all are more than welcome to keep talking about the book while I'm reading. The more conversation, the more Twitch loves it, so the more interaction points my channel gains. Okay. Look in the time architecture channel, Rat King, and you'll see what happened. Just scroll up a bit. Okay. Here we go again. Burlington, Vermont. Pretext. Winter has come later this season, as it has every year since the end of the war. Snow blankets the house and surrounding farmland, frost trees that shade the dirt track by the river. Everything about this scene is peaceful, except for the man with me. He insists on calling himself the Wacko because, and I quote, "Everyone else calls me that, why shouldn't you?" His stride is fast and purposeful. The cane given to him by his doctor and wife serves only to stab at the air. To be honest, I wasn't surprised to be nominated for vice president. Everyone knew a coalition party was inevitable. I'd been a rising star, at least until I self-destructed. That's what they said about me, right? All the cowards and hypocrites who'd rather die than see a real man express his passion. So what if I wasn't the world's best politician? I said what I felt, and I wasn't afraid to say it loud and clear. That's one of the main reasons I was the logical choice for the co-pilot. We made a great team. He was the light, I was the heat. Different parties, different personalities, and let's not kid ourselves, different skin colors as well. I knew I wasn't the first choice. I know who my party secretly wanted. But America wasn't ready to go that far. As stupid, ignorant, and infuriatingly Neolithic as it sounds, they'd rather have a screaming radical for a VP than another one of those people. So I wasn't surprised at my nomination. I was surprised at everything else. You mean the elections? Elections? Honolulu was still a madhouse. Soldiers, congressmen, refugees, all bumping into one another, trying to find something to eat or a place to sleep, or just find out what the hell was going on. That was paradise next to the mainland. The rocky line
was just being established. Everything west of it was a war zone. Why go through all the trouble of elections when you could have Congress simply vote for extended emergency powers? The Attorney General had tried it when he was mayor of New York. Almost got away with it too. I explained to the president that we didn't have the energy or resources to do anything but fight for our very existence. What did he say? Well, let's just say he convinced me otherwise. Can you elaborate? Good, but I don't want to mangle his... The old neurons aren't firing like they used to. Please try. You'll fact-check with his library? Promise. Well, we were in his temporary office, the so-called presidential suite of a hotel. He'd just been sworn in on Air Force 2. His old boss was sedated in the suite next to us. From the window, you could see the chaos on the streets, the ships at sea lining up to dock, the planes coming in every 30 seconds, and ground crews pushing them off the runway once they landed to make room for the new ones. I was pointing, shouting and gesturing with the passion I was famous for. We need a stable government, I kept saying. Elections are great in principle, but this is no time for high ideals. The president was cool, a lot cooler than me. Maybe it was all that military training, he said to me. This is the only time for high ideals, because those ideals are all that we have. We aren't just fighting for our physical survival, for the survival of our civilization. We don't have the luxury of old world pillars. We don't have a common heritage. We don't have the millennia of history. We have the dreams and promises that bind us together. All we have seems to struggle to remember. All we have is what we want to be. You see what he was saying? Our country only exists because people believed in it. And if it wasn't strong enough to protect us from this crisis, then what future could it ever hope to have? He knew that America wanted a Caesar, but to be one would mean the end of America. They say great times make great men. I don't buy it. I saw a lot of weakness, a lot of filth, people who should have risen to the challenge and either wouldn't or couldn't. Greed, fear, stupidity, and hate. I saw it before the war. I see it today. My boss was a great man. We were damn lucky to have him. The business of elections really set the tone for his entire administration. So many of his proposals looked crazy at first glance, but once you peeled back the first layer, you realized that underneath there existed a core of irrefutable logic. Like the new punishment laws, those really set me off. Putting people in stocks? Putting them in town squares? What was this? Old Salem? The Taliban's Afghanistan? It sounded barbaric, un-American. Until you really thought about the options. What were you going to do with thieves and looters? Put them in prison? Who would that help? Who could afford to divert able-bodied citizens to feed, clothe, and guard other able-bodied citizens? More importantly, why remove the punished from society when they could serve as a valuable deterrent? Yes, there was the fear of pain, the lash, the cane, but all of that paled when compared to public humiliation. People were terrified of having their crimes exposed. At a time when everyone was pulling together, helping each other out, working to protect and take care of one another, the worst thing you could do to someone was march them up into the public square with a giant poster reading, "I stole my neighbor's firewood." Shame is a powerful weapon, but it depended on everyone else doing the right thing. No one is above the law, and seeing a senator given 15 lashings for his involvement in war profiteering did more to curb crime than a cop on every street corner. Yes, there were work gangs, but those were the recidivists, those who'd been given chances time and time again. I remember the Attorney General suggesting that we dump as many of them into the infested zones as possible, rid ourselves of the drain and potential hazard of their continued presence. Both the President and I opposed this proposition. My objections were ethical. His were practical. We were still talking about American soil. Infested, yes, but hopefully one day to be liberated. The last thing we needed, he said, was to come up against one of these ex-cons as the new Grand Warlord of Duluth. I thought he was joking. Later, I saw the exact thing happen in other countries, as some exiled criminals rose to command their own isolated, and in some cases, powerful fiefdoms. I realized we dodged one hell of a speeding bullet. The work gangs were always an issue for us, politically, socially, and even economically. What other choice did we have for those who just refused to play nice with others? You did use the death penalty. Only in extreme cases. Sedition, sabotage, attempted political secession. Zombies weren't the only enemies, at least not in the beginning. The fundies? We had our share of religious fundamentalists. What country didn't? Many of them believed that we were, in some way, interfering with God's will. He chuckles. I'm sorry, I've got to learn to be more sensitive. But for crying out loud, you really think that the supreme creator of the infinite multiverse is going to have his plans unraveled by a few Arizona National Guardsmen? He waves the thought away. They got a lot more press than they should have. All because that nutbird tried to kill the president. In reality, they were much more a danger to themselves. All those mass suicides, the quote-unquote mercy child killings in Medford. Terrible business. Same with the greenies, the lefty version of the fundies. They believed that since the living dead only consumed animals, but not plants, it was the will of the divine goddess to favor flora over fauna. They made a little trouble, dumping herbicide in a town's water supply, booby-trapping trees so loggers couldn't use them for war production. That kind of eco-terrorism eats up headlines, but didn't really threaten our national security. The Rebs, on the other hand, armed, organized political secessionists. That was easily our most tangible danger. It was the only time I ever saw the president worried. He wouldn't let on, not with that dignified diplomatic veneer. Public, he treated it as just another issue, like food rationing or road repair. He'd say in private, they must be eliminated swiftly, decisively, and by any means necessary. Of course, he was only talking about those within the Western safe zone. These die-hard renegades either had some beef with the government's wartime policy or had already planned to secede years before and were just using the crisis as their excuse. These were the enemies of our country. The domestic ones swearing to defend our country. mentions in his or her oath. We didn't have to think twice about an appropriate response. But the secessionists east of the Rockies, in some of the besieged, isolated zone, that's when it got complicated. What's that? Because as the saying went, we didn't leave America. America left us. There's a lot of truth to that. We deserted people. Yes, we left some Special Forces volunteers, tried to supply them by sea and air. But from a purely moral standing, these people were truly abandoned. I couldn't blame them for wanting to go their own way. Nobody could. That's why when we began to reclaim lost territory, we allowed every secessionist enclave a chance for peaceful reintegration. But there was violence? But there was violence. I still have nightmares. Places like Bolivar and the Black Hills. I never see the actual images, not the violence or the aftermath. I always see my boss, this towering, vital man, getting sicker and weaker each time. He'd survived so much, shouldered such a crushing burden. You know, he never tried to find out what had happened to his relatives in Jamaica. Never even asked. He was so fiercely focused on the fate of our nation, so determined to preserve the dream that created it. I don't know if great times make great men, but I know they can kill them. Wenatchee, Washington. Pretext. Joe Muhammad's smile is as broad as his shoulders, while his day job is as the owner of the town's bicycle repair shop. His spare time is spent sculpting molten metal into exquisite works of art. He is no doubt most famous for the bronze statue on the Mall in Washington, D.C., the neighborhood security memorial of 2 standing citizens and 1 seated in a wheelchair. End of pretext. The recruiter was clearly nervous. She tried to talk me out of it. Had I spoken to the NRA representative first? Did I know about all the other essential war work? I didn't understand at first. I already had a job at the recycling plant. That was the point of neighborhood security teams, right? It was a part-time, volunteer service for when you were home from work. I tried explaining this to her. Maybe there was something I wasn't getting. As she tried some other half-hearted, half-assed excuses, I saw her flick to my chair. Joe is disabled. Can you believe that? Here we were, with mass extinction knocking on the door, and she's trying to be politically correct. I laughed. I laughed right in her face. What did she think when I just showed up without knowing what was expected of me? Didn't this dumb bitch read her own security manual? Well, I'd read it. The whole point of the NST program was to patrol your own neighborhood, walking, or in my case, rolling down the sidewalk, stopping to check each house. If for some reason you had to go inside, at least 2 members were always supposed to wait out in the street. He motions to himself. Hello? And what did she think we were facing anyway? It's not like we had to chase them over fences and across backyards. They came to us. And if and when they did so, let's just say, for the sake of argument, there was more than we could handle? Shit, if I couldn't roll myself faster than a walking zombie, how could I have lasted this long? I stated my case very clearly and calmly, and I even challenged her to present a scenario in which my physical state could be an impediment. She couldn't. There was some mumbling about having to check with her CO, Maybe I could come back tomorrow. I refused. I told her she could call her CO, and his CO, and everyone right up to bear one himself. But I wasn't moving until I got my orange vest. I yelled so loud everyone in the room could hear. All eyes turned to me, then to her. That did it. I got my vest and was out of there faster than anyone else that day. Like I said, neighborhood security literally means patrolling the neighborhood. It's a quasi-military outfit. We attended lectures and training courses. There were designated leaders and fixed regulations, but you never had to salute or call people sir or shit like that. Armament was pretty non-regulation as well. Mostly hand-to-hand jobs. Hatchets, bats, a few crowbars and machetes. We didn't have the lobotomizers yet. At least 3 people in your team had to have guns. I carried an AMT Lightning, this little semi-auto 22 caliber carbine. It had no kick, so I could shoot without having to lock down my wheels. Good gun, especially when ammo became standardized and reloads were still available. Teams changed depending on your schedule. It was pretty chaotic back then. The stress reorganizing everything. Night shift was always tough. You forget how dark the night really is without streetlights. There were barely any house lights too. People went to bed pretty early back then, usually when it got dark. So except for a few candles, or if someone had a license for a generator, like if they were doing essential war work from home, the houses were pitch black. You didn't even have the moon or the stars anymore. Too much crap in the atmosphere. We patrolled with flashlights. Basic civilian store-bought models. We still had batteries then, with red cellophane on the end to protect our night vision. We'd stop at each house, knock, ask whoever was on watch if everything was okay. The early months were a little unnerving because of the resettlement program. So many people were coming out of the camps that each day you might get at least a dozen new neighbors or even housemates. Never realized how good we had it before the war. Tucked away in my little Stepford suburbistan. Did I really need a 3,000 square foot house? 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a kitchen, living room, den, and home office? I'd lived alone for years, and suddenly I had a family from Alabama. 6 of them just show up at my door one day with a letter from the Department of Housing. It's unnerving at first, but you get used to it quickly. I didn't mind the Shannons. That was the family's name. We got along pretty well, and I always slept better. Someone standing watch. That was one of the new rules for people at home. Someone had to be the designated night watch. We had all their names on a list to make sure they weren't squatters and looters. We checked their ID, their face, asked them if everything was all quiet. They usually said yes, or maybe reported some noise we'd have to check out. By the second year, when the refugees stopped coming and everyone got to know each other, we didn't bother with lists and IDs anymore. Everything was calmer then. That first year, when the cops were still reforming and the safe zones weren't completely pacified, he shivers for dramatic effect. There were still a lot of deserted houses, shot up, broken into, or just abandoned with the doors left wide open. We'd put police tape across all doorways and windows. If any of them were found snapped, that could mean a zombie was in the house. That happened a couple of times. I'd wait outside, rifle ready. Sometimes you'd hear shouts, sometimes shots. Sometimes you just hear a moan, scuffling, then one of your teammates would come out with a bloody hand weapon and a severed head. I had to put a few down myself. Sometimes, when a team was inside and I was watching the street, I hear a noise, shuffling, rasping, something dragging itself through the bushes. I'd hit it with the light, call for backup, then take it down. One time, I almost got tagged. We were clearing a 2-story job. 4-bed, 4-bath, partially collapsed from where someone had driven a Jeep Liberty through the living room window. My partner asked if it was cool to take a powder break. I let her go behind the bushes. My bad. I was too distracted, too concerned with what was going on inside the house. I didn't notice she was behind me. Suddenly, there was this tug on my chair. I didn't turn, but something had the right wheel. I twisted, brought my light around. It was a dragger, the kind that had lost its legs. It snarled up at me from the asphalt, trying to climb over the wheel. The chair saved my life. It gave me the 1.5 seconds I needed to bring my carbine around. If I had been standing, I'd have grabbed my ankle, maybe even taken a chunk. That was the last time I slacked off at my job. Zombies weren't the only problem we had to deal with back then. There were looters. Not so much hardened criminals as just people who needed stuff to survive. Same with squatters. Both cases usually ended well. We'd just invite them home, give them what they needed, take care of them until the housing folks could step in. There were some real looters though. Professional bad guys. That was the only time I got hurt. He pulls down his shirt, exposing a circular scar the size of a pre-war dime. .9mm, right through the shoulder. My team chased him out of the house. I ordered him to halt. That was the only time I ever killed someone. Thank God. When the new laws came in, conventional crime pretty much dried up altogether. Then there were the ferals. You know, the homeless kids who'd lost their parents. We'd find them curled up in basements, in closets, under beds. A lot of them had walked from as far away as back east. They were in bad shape, all malnourished and sickly. A lot of times they'd run. Those were the only times I felt bad, that I couldn't chase them. Someone else would go. A lot of times they'd catch up. Not always. The biggest problem was the quislings. The quislings? Yeah, the people that went nutballs, started acting like zombies. Would you elaborate? Well, I'm not a shrink, so I don't know all the tech terms. That's all right. Well, as I understand it, there's a type of person who just can't deal with a fight or die situation. They're always drawn, they're afraid of. Instead of resisting it, they want to please it, join it, try to be like it. I guess that happens in kidnap situations. Like a Paddy Hearst / Stockholm Syndrome type. Or like in regular war, when people who are invaded sign up for the enemy's army. Collaborators, sometimes even more diehard than the people they're trying to mimic. Like those French fascists who were some of Hitler's last troops. Maybe that's why we call them quislings. Like it's a French word or something. But you couldn't do it in this war. You couldn't just throw up your hands and say, "Hey, don't kill me, I'm on your side." There was no gray area in this fight. No in between. I guess some people just couldn't accept that. It put them over the edge. They started moving like zombies, sounding like them, even attacking and trying to eat other people. That's how we found our first one. He was a male adult, mid-30s, dirty, dazed, shuffling down the sidewalk. We thought he was just in Z-shock, until he bit one of our guys in the arm. That was a horrible few seconds. I dropped the cue, whistling, with a headshot, then turned to check on my buddy. He was crumpled on the curb, swearing, crying, staring at the gash in his forearm. This was a death sentence, and he knew it. He was ready to do himself, until we discovered the guy I had shot had bright red blood pouring from his head. When we checked his flesh, we found he was still warm. You should have seen our buddy lose it. It's not every day you get a reprieve from the big governor in the sky. Ironically, he almost died anyway. The bastard had so much bacteria in his mouth, it caused a near-fatal staph infection. We thought maybe we'd stumbled upon some new discovery, but it turned out it had been happening for a while. The CDC was just about to go public. They even sent an expert up from Oakland to brief us on what to do if we encountered more of them. It blew our mind. Did you know that quislings were the reason some people used to think they were immune? But they were also the reason all those bullshit wonder drugs got so much hype. Think about it. Someone's on phalanx, gets bit, but survives. What else is he going to think? He probably wouldn't know there wasn't even such a thing as quislings. They're just as hostile as regular zombies, and in some cases, even more so. How so? Well, for one thing, they didn't freeze. I mean, yeah, they would if they were exposed over time, but in moderate cold. If they'd gone under while wearing warm clothes, they'd be fine. They also got stronger from the people they ate. Not like zombies. They could maintain over time. But you could kill them more easily. Yes and no. You didn't have to hit them in the head. You could take out the lungs, the heart, hit them everywhere, and eventually they'd bleed to death. But if you didn't stop them with just one shot, they'd just keep coming until they died. They don't feel pain? Hell no. It's that whole mind over matter thing. Being so focused, you're able to suppress relays. The brain and all that. You should really talk to an expert. Please continue. Okay. Well, that's why we could never talk them down. There was nothing left to talk to. These people were zombies. Maybe not physically, but mentally, you could not tell the difference. Even physically, it might be hard if they were dirty enough, bloody enough, diseased enough. Zombies don't really smell that bad. Not individually, and not if they're fresh. How do you tell one of these from a mimic with a whopping dose of gangrene? Couldn't. It's not like the military would let us have sniffer dogs or anything. You had to use the eye test. Ghouls don't blink. I don't know why. Maybe because they use their senses equally? Their brains don't value sight as much? Maybe because they don't have as much bodily fluid, they can't keep using it to coat their eyes. Who knows? But they don't blink, and quislings do. That's how you spotted them. Back up a few paces, and wait a few seconds. Darkness was easier. You just shone a beam in their faces. If they didn't blink, you took them down. And if they did? Well, our orders were to capture quislings if possible, and use deadly force only in self-defense. It sounded crazy. Still does. But we rounded up a few. Hogtied them, handed them over to the police or National Guard. I'm not sure what they did with them. I've heard stories about Walla Walla. You know, the prison where hundreds of them were fed and clothed and even medically cared for. His eyes flicked to the ceiling. You don't agree? Hey, I'm not going there. You want to open that can of worms, read the papers. Every year, some lawyer or priest or politician tries to stoke that fire for whatever side best suits them. Personally, I don't care. I don't have any feeling towards them one way or another. I think the saddest thing about them is that they gave up so much and in the end lost anyway. Why is that? Because even though we can't tell the difference between them, the real zombies can. Remember early in the war when everybody was trying to work on a way to turn the living dead against one another? There was all this documented proof about infighting, eyewitness accounts, and even footage of one zombie attacking another. Stupid. It was zombies attacking quislings, but you never would have known to look at it. Quislings don't scream. They just lie there, not even trying to fight, writhing in that slow, robotic way, eaten alive by the very creatures they're trying to be. Oh, I'm gonna take a brief break there. We'll get the ads out of the way, and then I think we'll do one more chapter, because obviously these chapters are much longer now. So we'll do one more chapter, see where that leaves us with time-wise. Oh, boy. Oh my god, almighty. Oh my god. Well, I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. Whew. Oh, my neck. I need to stretch out a bit here. Oh, just move the camera a bit in 14. Make sure I don't DC. Oh, did it? Oh, I thought that would go away. That's fine. Yeah, it's it's the public event system from like Destiny. Okay, Destiny took it from this game, but yeah, it's that whole thing. It's like a public temporary thing. I thought I'd chosen a spot that was nowhere near, and I thought I had like completely disabled the on-screen effects, but it's fine. Big deal. It usually triggers if you're within like a couple hundred meters of one. I thought about it, Sego, but I don't feel like it's gonna be wasted. I'd rather just do this. Fine. I'd rather not have to make one for every single one of these streams. I'm only going to use it the one time. That's fine. Besides, 99% of people aren't like actually watching this. They're just listening. Oh, boy, boy, boy. Oh, my neck. Give it another minute or two, and then we'll keep going. Yes, unfortunately, I mean, you, Wandering Ronan, and maybe Dorn, and obviously Sego and Rat King appear sometimes. But the majority just listen. It's funny. There was a lot of people who voted for these streams. Not many show up to them. They're fairly quiet. It makes me think that they're waiting for them to end and just kind of watch it. Which, I mean, is completely fair. Even so. Oh, my. Oh, let me read the thing here. Yeah, there was some. There actually was an explanation with Quisling. What was Quisling? Oh, it was the Norwegian. Ah, okay. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I'm sure because. Oh, okay, okay.
So Quisling was prime minister of some country that worked with the. Oh, Norway. Sorry, yeah, it was Norwegian prime minister that tried to work with Hitler. Thus, whole traitor thing. The Quislings is like a fancy word for traitor. Oh yeah, I'd imagine so. Jesus Christ, that's a pretty horrendous thing to do. Okay, people should be back from the ads, I think. What's on the timer racking for the ad thingy? Or is it done? Oh, God, excuse me. Really that long? Oh, okay. We can chat then for a bit. We got about 2 minutes here for the maximum amount, because obviously some people have less ads, some people have more. 2 minutes left for this. I may end up playing something after this. I'll see. If I do, then obviously racking you can like clearly separate the two VODs. But probably won't. Because chances are my voice is going to be completely gone by the end. I made the mistake. I made the correct decision this time to put my tea into a proper like heated thermos, so it doesn't go cold after 10 minutes. Yeah, fair enough. Well, I mean, it's been 3 minutes since you started, so let's return. Should be back by now. I will move on to a wonderful place that nobody hates and everybody loves. Malibu, California. Pretext. I don't need a photograph to recognize Roy Elliott. We met for coffee on the restored Malibu Pier Fortress. Those around us also instantly recognized him, but, unlike pre-war days, kept a respectful distance. End of pretext. ADS. That was my enemy. Asymptomatic Demise Syndrome, or Apocalyptic Despair Syndrome, depending on who you were talking to. Whatever the label, it killed as many people in those early stalemate months as hunger, disease, interhuman violence, or the living dead. No one understood what had happened at first. We'd stabilized the Rockies. We'd sanitized the safe zones. And still, we were losing upwards of 100 or so people a day. Wasn't suicide. We had plenty of those. No, this was different. Some people had minimal wounds or easily treatable ailments. Some were in perfect health. They would simply go to sleep one night and not wake up the next morning. The problem was psychological. Case of just giving up, not wanting to see tomorrow because you knew it could only bring more suffering. Losing faith, the will to endure. It happens in all wars. It happens in peacetime too, just not on this scale. It was helplessness, or at least the perception of helplessness. I understand that feeling. I directed movies all my adult life. They called me the boy genius, the wunderkind who couldn't fail, even though I'd done so often. Suddenly, I was a nobody, an F6. The world was going to hell, and all my vaunted talents were powerless to stop it. When I heard about ADS, the government was trying to keep it quiet. I had to find out from a contact at Cedars Sinai. When I heard about it, something snapped. Like the time I made my first Super 8 short and screened it for my parents.
This I can do. I realized. This enemy I can fight. The rest is history. He laughs. I wish. I went straight to the government. They turned me down. Really? I would think, given your career. What career? They wanted soldiers and farmers. Real jobs, remember? It was like, hey, sorry, no dice. But can I get your autograph? Now, I'm not the surrendering type. When I believe in my ability to do something, there is no such word as no. I explained to the distress rep that it wouldn't cost Uncle Sam a dime. I'd use my own equipment, my own people. All I'd need from them was access to the military. Let me show the people what you're doing to stop this, I told him. Let me give them something to believe in. Again, I was refused. The military had more important missions right now than posing for the camera. Did you go over his head? To who? There were no boats to Hawaii, and Sinclair was racing up and down the west coast. Anybody in any position to help was either physically unavailable or far too distracted with more important matters. Couldn't you have become a freelance journalist? Gotten a government press pass? Would have taken too long. Most mass media was either knocked out or federalized. What was left had to rebroadcast public safety announcements to make sure anyone just tuning in would know what to do. Everything was still such a mess. We had barely passable roads, let alone the bureaucracy to give me full-time journalist status. It might have taken months with 100 dying every day. I couldn't wait. I had to do something immediately. I took my DV cam, some spare batteries, and a solar power charger. My oldest son came with me as my sound man and first AD. We traveled on the road for 1 week, just the two of us on mountain bikes, looking for stories. We didn't have to go far. Just outside of Greater Los Angeles, in a town called Claremont, are 5 colleges: Pomona, Pitzer, Scripps, Harvey Mudd, and Claremont McKenna. At the start of the Great Panic, when everyone else was running, literally, for the hills, 300 students chose to make a stand. They turned the women's college at Scripps into something resembling a medieval city. They got their supplies from the other campuses. Their weapons were a mix of landscaping tools and ROTC practice rifles. They planted gardens, dug wells, fortified an already existing wall, while the mountains burned behind them and the surrounding suburbs descended into violence. Those 300 kids held off 10,000 zombies. 10,000 over the course of 4 months until the Inland Empire would finally be pacified. We were lucky to get there just at the tail end, just in time to see the last of the undead fall, as cheering students and soldiers linked up under the oversized homemade Old Glory fluttering from the Pomona Bell Tower. What a story. 96 hours of raw footage in the can. I would have liked to have gone longer, but time was critical. 100 a day lost. Remember, we had to get this out there as soon as possible. I brought the footage back to my house, put it together in my edit bay. My wife did the narration. We made 14 copies, all on different formats, and screened them that Saturday night at different camps and shelters all over LA. I called it Victory at Avalon, the Battle of the 5 Colleges. That name, Avalon, comes from some stock footage one of the students had shot during the siege. It was the night before their last, worst attack, when a fresh horde from the east of the city was clearly visible on the horizon. The kids were hard at work, sharpening weapons, reinforcing defenses, standing guard on the walls and towers. Song floating across the campus from the loudspeaker that played constant music to keep morale up. A Scripps student, the voice like an angel, was singing the Roxy music song. It was such a beautiful rendition, and such a contrast with the raging storm about to hit. I laid it over my preparing for battle montage. I still get choked up when I hear it. How did it play with the audience? It bombed! Not just the scene, but the whole movie at least. That's what I thought. I'd expected a more immediate reaction. Cheering, applause. I would never have admitted this to anyone, even to myself, but I had this egotistical fantasy of people coming up to me afterward, tears in their eyes, grabbing my hands, thanking me for showing them the light at the end of the tunnel. They didn't even look at me. I stood by the doorway like some conquering hero. They just filed past silently, with their eyes on their shoes. I went home that night thinking, oh well, it was a nice idea. Maybe the potato farm in MacArthur Park can use our hand. What happened? 2 weeks went by. I got a real job, helping to reopen at Topanga Canyon. Then one day, a man rode up to my house. Just came in on horseback, as if out of an old Cecil B. DeMille western. He was a psychiatrist from the county health facility in Santa Barbara. They'd heard about the success of the movie and asked if I had any extra copies. Yes? That's what I said. As it turns out, the very night after Avalon made its debut, ADS cases dropped in LA by a whole 5%. At first, they thought it might just be a statistical anomaly, until a further study revealed that the decline was drastically noticeable among communities where the movie was shown. And no one told you? No one, he laughs. Not the military, not the municipal authorities, not even the people who ran the shelters where it was continuing to be screened without my knowledge. I don't care. The point is it worked. It made a difference. And it gave me a job for the rest of the war. I got a few volunteers together, as much of my old crew as I could find. That kid who shot the Claremont stock footage, Malcolm von Ryzen. Yes, that Malcolm. He became my DP. We commandeered an abandoned dubbing house in West Hollywood and started cranking them out by the hundreds. We put them on every train, every caravan, every coastal ferry heading north. It took a while to get responses. When they came, he smiles, holding his hands up in thanks. 10% drop throughout the entire Western Safe Zone. I was already on the road by then, shooting more stories. Anacapa was already wrapped, and we were halfway through Mission District. By the time Dos Palmos hit screens, and ADS was down 23%, only then did the government finally take an interest in me. Additional resources? He laughs again. No. I'd never for help, and they sure weren't going to give it. But I did finally get access to the military. That opened up a whole new world. Is that when you made Fire of the Gods? He nods. The army had 2 functioning laser weapons programs, Zeus and the MTH-EL. Zeus was originally designed for munitions clearing, zapping landmines and unexploded bombs. It was small and light enough to be mounted in a specialized Humvee. The gunner sighted a target through a coaxial camera in the turret. He then placed the aim point at the intended surface then fired a pulse beam through the same optical aperture. Is that too technical? Not at all. I'm sorry. I became extremely immersed in the project. Beam was a weaponized version of solid-state industrial lasers, the kind used to cut steel in factories. It could either burn through a bomb's outer casing or heat it to a point that it detonated the explosives package. Same principle worked for zombies. On higher settings, it punched right through their foreheads. On lower settings, it literally boiled their brain until it exploded through the ears, nose, and eyes. The footage we shot was dazzling, but Zeus was a pop gun next to methyl. The acronym stands for Mobile Tactical High Energy Laser, co-designed by the United States and Israel to take out small incoming projectiles. When Israel declared self-quarantine, there were so many terrorist groups were lobbing mortar rounds and rockets across the security wall, MTHEL was what knocked them down. About the size and shape of a World War II searchlight, was in fact a deuterium fluoride laser, much more powerful than the solid state on Zeus. The effects were devastating. It blasted flesh from bones that then heated white or shattering into dust. When played at regular speed, it was magnificent, but at slow-mo, fire of the gods. Is it true that the number of ADS cases were halved a month after the movie's release? I think that might be an overstatement, but people were lined up their off hours. Some saw it every night. The poster campaign showed a close-up of a zombie being atomized. The image was lifted right from a frame in the movie, the one classic shot when the morning fog actually allowed you to see the beam. The caption underneath read simply, "Next." It single-handedly saved the program. Your program? No. Zeus and Methyl. They were in jeopardy? Methyl was due to close a month after shooting. Zeus had already been chopped. We had to beg, borrow, and steal, literally, to get it reactivated just for our cameras. Distress had deemed both as a gross waste of resources. Were they? Oh, inexcusably so. The M in Methyl's mobile really meant a convoy of specialized vehicles, all of which were delicate, none truly all-terrain, and each one completely dependent on the others. Methyl also required both tremendous power and copious amounts of a highly unstable, highly toxic chemicals for the lasering process. Zeus was a little more economical. It was easier to cool, easier to maintain, and because it was Humvee mounted, it could go anywhere it was needed. The problem was, why would it be needed? Even on high power, the gunner still had to hold a beam in place, on a moving target, mind you, for several seconds. A good sharpshooter could get the job done in half the time with twice the kills. That erased the potential for rapid fire, which was exactly what you needed in swarm attack. In fact, both units had a squad of riflemen permanently assigned to them. People protecting a machine that is designed to protect people. They were that bad? Not for their original role. Methyl kept Israel safe from terrorist bombardment. And Zeus actually came out of retirement to clear unexploded ordnance during the army's advance. As purpose-built weapons, they were outstanding. As zombie killers, they were hopeless duds. So why did you film then? Because Americans worship technology. It's an inherent trait in the national zeitgeist. Whether we realize it or not, even the most indefatigable Luddite can't deny our country's techno prowess. We split the atom. We reached the moon. We filled every household and business with more gadgets and gizmos than early sci-fi writers could ever have dreamed of. I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm in no place to judge, but I do know that just like all those ex-atheists in foxholes, most Americans were still praying for the god of science to save them. But it didn't. But it didn't matter. That movie was such a hit that I was asked to do a whole series. I called it Wonder Weapons. 7 films on our military's cutting-edge technology, none of which made any strategic difference, but all of which were psychological war winners. Isn't that a lie? It's okay, you can say it. Yes, they were lies. Sometimes it's not a bad thing. Lies are neither bad nor good. Like a fire, they can either keep you warm, burn you to death, depending on how they're used. The lies our government told us before the war, the ones that were supposed to keep us happy and blind, those were the ones that burned, because they prevented us from doing what had to be done. However, by the time I made Avalon, everyone was already doing everything they could possibly do to survive. The lies of the past were long gone. Now the truth was everywhere, shambling down their streets, crashing through their doors, clawing at their throats. The truth was that no matter what we did, chances were most of us, if not all of us, never going to see the future. The truth that we were standing at what might be the twilight of our species, and that truth was freezing 100 people to death every night. They needed something to keep them warm. So I lied. So did the president, every doctor and priest, every platoon leader, and every parent. We're going to be okay. That was our message. That was the message of every other filmmaker during the war. Did you ever hear of the Hero City? Of course. Great film, right? Marty made it over the course of the siege. Just him shooting on whatever medium he could get his hands on. What a masterpiece. Courage, the determination, the strength, dignity, kindness, and honor really makes you believe in the human race. It's better than anything I've ever done. You should see it. I have. Which version? I'm sorry? Which version did you see? I wasn't aware that there were 2. You need to do your homework, young man. Marty made both a wartime and post-war version of the Hero City. The version you saw, was it 90 minutes? I think. Did it show the dark side of the heroes in the Hero City? Did it show the violence and the betrayal and the cruelty, the depravity, the bottomless evil in some of those quote-unquote heroes' hearts? No, of course not. Why would it? That was our reality, and it's what drove so many people to get snuggled in bed, blow out their candles, take their last breath. Marty chose instead to show the other side, one that gets people out of bed the next morning, makes them scratch and scrape and fight for their lives because someone is telling them that they're going to be okay. There's a word for that kind of lie. Hope. Okay, and I think we are going to take a break there. No need to run ads, Rat King. Oh my god. Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed our little bit of reading here. The VOD should be going live enough soon. Live soon enough. Wow, stroke. We're gonna call it there. I think we're gonna be happy with just a story time. I don't like the idea of muddying it up with some random gameplay as well. Oh. Hope not too many of you have fallen asleep. But let's see, what day is tomorrow? Tuesday. We're probably having a break tomorrow. And we should hopefully be back Wednesday for RimWorld. All going well. And then we'll see where the week goes from there. So, thank you, Wandering. Good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah, I see. I figured people love doing stuff while this is going on.
Hope you're geared up for
Thank you,
adventure.
Wandering Ronan. Thank you so much for the follow. I hope you join again. So yes, Wednesday will be our next definite stream, and we will see you all in the next one. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.